Hi, welcome to the photography show Spring Shoots. I'm Angela Nicholson. I'm the founder of SheClicks, which is a community for female photographers, and I'm one of the founders of Camera Jabber, which is a website for photographers with news, reviews, tips and techniques. I'm hosting this product demo and I'll be keeping an eye on your questions. So if you have a question that you'd like to ask, please tap on the button in the top right corner and type in your question, and I'll make sure that it gets relayed to James. So let's get on with it. We're all here to learn about one of the most exciting cameras that's been announced in recent times, the Fujifilm GFX100, and I'm joined by James Gilbert, Fujifilm UK. Hi James, how are you?
Good morning. I'm all good, thank you, Angela.
How are you? You must be having a very exciting time. I'm great, thank you. I say you must be having a very exciting time at the moment with the GFX100S.
Yeah, it's good fun. I'm really enjoying it. There's been a lot of interest in the camera and it's being received really well.
Great news. Well, yeah, it looks absolutely fantastic. I'm very excited about it. So perhaps you'd get on with your presentation.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. So I'm going to go through and show you the GFX100S. As you can see, we are saying it is more than full frame. Now, the sensor size on the GFX100S is a 4:3 aspect ratio. So as you can see there, it's a 43.8 by 32.9 sensor. So that's going to give you a 55mm diagonal, 102 megapixel, and it's backlit as well. Now, backlit sensors, for those of you that are not familiar with them, that means that the image circuitry, the circuitry that takes the information from the pixels and gives it to the camera, is behind the pixel face. So the benefit of that is that when you're shooting in lower light, or just generally, to be fair, the maximum amount of light that is possible is hitting the sensor rather than hitting circuitry and then the sensor. So you're going to get a lot of light into the camera. So you are going to get excellent images, essentially. Now, as you can see, it's 102 megapixels. So, of course, you're going to get a huge amount of resolution. You can blow your files up really large, or you can edit them or however you want to use them. Equally as well, if you're shooting for archival, perhaps, it'll be good for that as well, because we can all remember kind of 5-6 years ago when kind of 10 or 20 megapixels was a huge amount of resolution, and now it seems pretty standard. As we are a larger than full frame sensor as well, it's 1.7 times larger than full frame. You're going to get more tonality out of the sensor, and you're also going to get better bokeh. Like it says more bokeh there, but better bokeh. A shallower depth of field relatively for an aperture, but also a nicer drop off as well. Now, as this is, of course, we are Fuji with Fujifilm. We have got our film simulations on the camera, and this is a new one that we've put onto the GFX100S. It is nostalgic negative. As you can see there, it's a much of a warmer film. So it looks kind of, you'll see on the next slide here, you can see the comparison between our kind of default, our Provia, and the nostalgic negative, which is just there. So it's a little bit more orangey, you get a little bit more light into the shadows as well. And it's a warmer look overall. Now, as you can see, if we just have a look at some other examples as well, you can see there, the blue on that sky on the ship is looking lovely. The stairs overall are looking nice and punchy as well. So it's still got the nice clarity and tonal range that you would expect from us, but it's got a warmer and more nostalgic feel as well. Now, I mentioned the resolution that you're going to get out of the sensor, 102 megapixels. For those that's not enough, we of course have our multi-shift, pixel shift multi-shot. What that will allow you to do is shoot the camera, and that'll give you a 400 megapixel image, and that's going to give you a really, really high resolution image without any false color as well. The way that works is it uses the Inbody image stabilization system to shift the sensor around. It takes a sequence of pictures, and then you can put those together using our pixel shift software. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the body itself. There, of course, is a GFX100, but the GFX100, as you see, is a cracking camera, but it's quite large. So we made the GFX100S smaller and lighter. As you can see there, it should be 500 grams lighter and 30% smaller. It is a very small and lightweight body, especially considering the size of the sensor as well. We managed to do that by making the sensor, by making the internals smaller and lighter. So you can see there the Inbody image stabilization unit is smaller and lighter, and we also worked on the shutter mechanism as well. I'll go into those in some detail. So the Inbody image stabilization system, we used our experience of working on the XH1, the XT4, the 100, the GFX100, of course. And we worked on that to give the image stabilization unit a new gyroscopic sensor. We also worked on the detection algorithms as well, and that allowed us to make the stabilization unit smaller and lighter. Now, as you can see there, it's going to give you better performance as well. So it's going to give you 6 stops rather than 5.5 stops, pretty much across the range against the GFX100. Now, you'll see from the top, we've got a list of the primes and of the zooms as well. Now, our zoom lenses and the 120 f4 and the 250 f4, they have OIS on them. And the image stabilization on the lens itself still works in harmony with the Inbody image stabilization unit on the body. So they'll work together. So on the lenses that have a switch on them, for example, that say OIS on or off, it's not a case of when you turn it on or off that the lens is then going to be on or off, but the body stays on or off. It's an override switches. Do you want image stabilization? Yes or no. For those lenses that don't have image stabilization on them, of course, the body will do that for it. And for the ones that do, not only will they supplement the movements of the lens itself, they'll also add a roll function. So essentially 5 axes, up and down, left and right, tilt back and forward, tilt left and right, and then roll. So they will add that 5th axis as well. So it's a smaller and lighter and better operating unit too. We also managed to make the shutter unit smaller and lighter as well. And again, you see 22% smaller. The IBIS was 20% smaller. And the way we've managed to do that is by changing the layout of the internals, essentially. So we managed to work on the gearbox, make it smaller and lighter as well. And the main plate that holds the whole thing together, that's lighter too. You'll also see there as well, there is a new shock absorbing mechanism. So when you're actuating the shutter, just as it finishes its travel, there's a shock absorbing layer there, which will mean it can work faster. We can do it and still keep the endurance going for the shutter as well. You'll also notice too that there is a release time lag of 0.07 seconds versus 0.09 seconds. So it's a little bit faster to trip too. Which is always good. Compared to the GFX100, it's still 0.004 of a second at the top end for a mechanical shutter, which on a larger than full frame sensor is very, very fast because there's a lot of distance to travel. And it will still do your 5 frames per second as well. So if you're doing any sports or action or anything like that, you're still going to be able to take the shots and get the sequence. Now, being a professional body, you would expect it to be built to a professional standard, and it is. So it's a magnesium alloy body. So it is full magnesium alloy. So it is resilient, but also as well, the lens mount, if you're using something like the 250mm f4 with the 1.4 teleconverter on it, the lens mount has been reinforced so you can be using that all day and swing it around and don't have any worries at all. So it is reinforced for a lot of use. And of course, because much as the weather at the moment is quite nice, it's not always quite nice. There is weather resistance as well. Same with the rest of the GFX bodies and lenses too. And it's sealed in approximately 60 places there for all kinds of shooting conditions. As far as temperature ranges go, it'll run down to -10 degrees C. On the 100S, the focusing is very fast. I mentioned the sequence of shots that you can get using the 5 frames per second on the shutter release on the drive, but that's no good if you're taking a lot of shots in a quick succession if they're not focused. So the focusing on it uses the camera uses phase detect focusing. That covers the whole of the sensor. And you'll see there it focuses very quickly as well. And the camera can be constantly looking at the scene and working out what's going to happen. So it's focusing before you've even pushed the shutter button. That's using the pre-AF mode. With the new 80mm f1.7, the GFX100S will also focus down to -5.5 EV. Now, that's not necessarily something that everyone will use all the time, but it's something that I've found myself using more often than not, especially at the moment where we've got kind of quite clear skies. Because the weather's not so good, so we get a bit of rain, so that clears the sky out nicely. And if I want to do a little bit of kind of low light work, I can do. Also as well, if you're working in a studio and you're running on autofocus and you're just running off your modeling lights, the ability to focus in very low light is very useful. We've also improved the face and eye detection as well. With the GFX100 and the 100S, you're able to track the subject throughout the whole scene, not only up, down, left and right, but also moving to and away from you as well. And that will, the face detection, you've got a few modes on it. So you've got face detection with auto eye detect, and you've got face detection with subject's left or right eye, depending on what you want to do for it. So you can choose it to work as you want to. The tracking autofocus is also very fast. There are a number of different presets that you can set the tracking focus to. I think there's 5 cases off the top of my head, which give you kind of presets as to how the camera operates. So whether or not it's to expect something rapidly appearing and then tracking, or whether or not it's expecting something to come towards you, or if it's expecting to track kind of erratic movement. So you can set it as you want to. And that works as well, as I said, with the drive mode giving you 5 frames per second to be nice and fast for sports wildlife or anything really. Now, we changed the controls on the camera. This is a new feature that we've put on the 100S. We've gone to an MASP dial on the top, but we've also got your custom settings there. So there's 1 to 6, custom 1 to 6. They work in stills and movie as well. Now, for photographers who are can find themselves doing a lot of things, I talk to a lot of customers and I say, what kind of photography do you do? And it's pretty much a 50-50 blend between people that go, I do this specifically, so it could be landscapes or architecture or portraits or whatever. And then the other half will be people going, I shoot a bit of everything really. So for those that shoot a bit of everything, or even those that just have a number of different setups that they do consistently, the custom 1 to 6 menus will allow you to set the camera to do pretty much everything, and it's just preset. So for example, if I'm in a studio, I will want to be shooting in manual. I want to be shooting face detect. I don't want to be messing around. I'll be shooting raw with possibly a custom white balance or an auto white balance if it's custom, if it's the studio that I know. I will want that set, so I will set that to custom 1. But the next day I could be out doing street photography, in which case I probably don't want face detection. I want wide zone tracking on AFC. I want auto white balance, and perhaps because it's just photography for me, I won't need to worry about RAW. I can shoot JPEG, maybe in Acros, so I can set custom 2 for that. The next day I could be doing sports or wildlife, so I'd have it set for something else entirely. But the camera can be set really quickly, so it's always ready for how you want it. With MASP, that's a slightly faster way of working as well. MASP, for those that perhaps haven't used Fujifilm before or have come from DSLRs or something like that, should be familiar to them. But it will replicate how the rest of the Fujifilm system works, just on one dial, so it's nice and quick. That dial, of course, is locking there through the central, through the pin through the top, just a toggle on, toggle off. We also changed the controls on the back of the camera a little bit. We tweaked them. The focusing stick there, the joystick at the top, the pad with the multiple divots on it, it's a little bit larger and it's a little bit flatter. It's a little thing. There's lots of little tweaks and improvements that we've had feedback from our photographers and from our customers, and that was one of them. So the focusing joystick on the rest of the system, both the GFX and the X series, is easy and simple to use. But the pad is a little bit nicer to use. I obviously play with the whole range. I've got the whole range. And I find that the larger and flatter pad on the GFX100S means that it's slightly, nice is a strong word, but more pleasant to use. It'll go up, down, left and right, and also go into the diagonals as well. So if you're moving around your focus points quickly, you can do that's nice and fast as well. We've also changed the, again, it's a little thing, but it's feedback and comfort for how you interact with the camera. The command dial at the back of the camera, which is where you change either aperture or shutter speed or exposure compensation or ISO, depending on how you've got it set, is now a little bit larger. So it's the same size as on the front dial. And that's really useful. It's if you're running kind of manual or if you're tweaking by a third of a stop or something like that, having a larger diameter of wheel means that the travel is slightly further between each third. So it is easier to find the third. I don't find myself skipping kind of 2/3 and then coming back. So again, it's a little tweak, but it's a nice user tweak. We've also made it so that the rotation control on each dial can be changed. Everyone has a personal preference on how they interact with their camera. For me, if I wind my dials to the right, I know that's a faster shutter speed or a wider aperture. If I dial them to the left, it's the opposite. So that's how I have my camera set, but you might prefer something entirely different. And now we allow you to customize it. And that's not just a bulk customization, that's both of them can be changed individually. Another way we've made the camera, or we've been able to make the camera smaller, is to use the NPW235. That's the same batteries in the XT4. And as you can see there, you're going to get about 460 frames per charge. So it is really high capacity. It's a little bit more than the NP-T125 that you get out of the GFX100 and the rest of the GFX range. So it's smaller and lighter and gives you more power as well, which is always a good thing, and that sits nicely in the grip as well. You can charge that via USB-C through the camera, although there is a dual charger as well for it. The viewfinder is very clear, very bright. As you can see, it's 3.69 million dots, 0.77 times. Now you'll see there's a table there showing a different way of working with it. So if you're using one of the boost modes, whereas on previous models, the boost, when you go into your power settings, it was essentially, do you want the camera to run at best possible performance, yes or no, or do you want to save battery? So if you're out in the field and you haven't got the option to charge, then you would set your camera to normal. But if you want it running as fast as it possibly can, you run it in boost. Now on the GFX100 and 100S, then you have the ability to change the autofocus depending on how you're doing it. So you can change the viewfinder depending on how the autofocus will behave. We have also got as well, looking at screens and looking at how you're interacting with the camera, we have the touchscreen too. So the touchscreen is 3.2 inch, nice and bright and fast as well. It's a three-way, so you can tilt it out for waist level viewfinder or tilt it down for kind of reproduction work or something like that if you're running with a tripod. But you could also tilt it out from the left-hand side. I'll show you that when we're doing the Q&As, for portraits from the waist. Which again is a little thing, but it's just a nice way. You're not having to contort the camera around to see exactly what's going on. And again, more feedback that we've had. The hinge on the camera has been extended a little bit, so it still fits nice and flush on the back of the body, but the screen now comes out further. So it now comes out past the eyepiece on the viewfinder. I never found that to be an issue on the GFX100 or the 50S with the standard viewfinder eye cup, but I tend to use our larger eye cup because I'm wearing glasses, so I like to stop as much light from coming out as possible in from the side. So the screen being able to flip out is always nice. It flips out further, so it means that the eye cup is not obscuring the screen at all. Now, talking of other screens, we have the sub LCD monitor at the top here. So the sub LCD monitor is that's where you're seeing all of your information about what's going on for when you're taking your images. So as you can see there, as it is a standard, it's the EXIF data. So the EXIF data is going to show you kind of we can see shutter speed, aperture, ISO, whatever. That's customizable, and that's customizable between stills and video as well. So it depends on how you want to have it. I tend to shoot aperture priority auto ISO unless I'm doing fixed work in a studio or something like that. So I personally would have the aperture first, then the ISO second, then the shutter speed afterwards. But that's personal preference. You can change it around as you like. Equally, if that screen isn't as legible as you would expect, depending on the light you're in, you can reverse it as well. So instead of it being a dark background with light text, you can flip it so it's a light background, dark text. If you are a little bit more old school as well, you can change that screen so it shows you dials for those that have been Fujifilm users for a while and like their dials. You can put the dials on there showing the shutter speed and the ISO as well with the meter across the bottom. And for those that want to see a histogram and want to see it larger than perhaps on the screen or just want it replicated on the top plate, that will also allow you to have a histogram there as well. And you can toggle through using one of the buttons on the right just there. Now those buttons, as with the rest of the buttons on the camera, well pretty much all of them, can be set. They can be changed to a function that you want to have. So for me, I tend to have, as I said, because I shoot aperture priority auto ISO pretty much all the time, I will have one of those buttons there set to ISO, so I can just hit that and go through to my ISO auto choices. You can set it up as you like. There's no harm, no foul with that. We like to let people change it as they want to. And the screen as well is also a touch screen. So you could use the touch screen to swipe up, down, left and right as function buttons, or you can use it to focus, or you can use it to do none of that if you don't want to use the touch screen. Equally for reviewing, you've got your joystick for moving around your image as you've focused it or you've zoomed in on it. But you can also use the touch screen as well to move around. There's a double tap to go straight into 100%, double tap to come out. So you can tweak the camera. It's very intuitive, so you can use it as you want to. For those using it on a tripod, we have got the hand grip. and the hand grip there is showing you the hand grip at the bottom is also an Arca Swiss plate as well. Just gives you a little bit more at the bottom to hold on to if you're using gloves perhaps, or you've got larger hands, or you just prefer a little bit more to hold on to on the camera. But we have got that as well. And as you can see, that tripod hole is right down the middle. So it's on lens axis as well. So that's kind of stills that we've talked about. But what about video? So the GFX100S, for people who are shooting video, is extremely powerful. So it'll shoot DCI 4K at 400 meg per second, 422 10-bit external with no crop. Now you can see on that table there, it says no crop and 1.1 times crop. The 1.1 times crop is for if you're using it with digital image stabilization, for example, rather than having it on or off and then going from no crop to 1.1 to no crop to 1.1 for editing. You can just set the camera to run in 1.1 if you are using digital image stabilization, or not if you're using the IBIS. So you could use it as you want to. Features-wise, these are the formats it'll shoot. So it will shoot 265 and 264 in MOV and MP4. Obviously, all the film simulations that we have on the camera, they can be used as well. So you've got your returner and your returner bleach bypass specifically for movies, but I also, as I said, I like Acros, so I tend to use that. F-Log, so that's our log. You can shoot HLG and RAW as well. That's ProRes RAW. As I mentioned, you've got the digital image stabilization, and we've put the dual display of recording time as well. So you've got, whereas before it was just kind of, it will either give you one or t'other. Now it'll show you both together, how much you've taken and how much you've got left as well. And that's kind of you can see on the side there where it's got next to the times, you can see it's going to memory card and HDMI. Now the HDMI feed is a clean feed, so it'll record straight out to a separate recording device. So you can do that straight off as well, but the camera will also record for 2 hours, which is a huge amount. So it will record straight off. You don't have to you don't necessarily have to stream out, but if you are doing a long take or something like that, whereas normally you'd be limited to 29 minutes 59 seconds, you're not now. It's to 120 minutes. So that's the formats that you've got for the film. You've also got as well all the things that you'd have in stills. So for focusing bits and bobs, you've got your face detection as well. And as I mentioned, you've got your custom 1 to 6 as well. If you want to use those for different things. So as I said, you might want to have it set for custom 1 will be black and white, custom 2 will be color. However you want to use it, you can change it. And that's kind of the GFX100S in a nutshell, really. Hopefully that has answered your questions. But obviously, if you have got any questions, then Angela will be able to point them to me. So, Angela.
Hi. That's it's a fantastic camera. I mean, there's a huge array of features that you've run through there.
Tell me about it. There's a lot to learn.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I think we primarily think of medium format cameras as stills cameras, but increasingly they are of use for video as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Have you seen a lot of interest?
Yeah, a lot. I mean, we saw that, to be fair, with the GFX100 as well, because that was the first kind of larger than full frame sensor to do 4K at 30 frames per second with IBIS. So a lot of people were already aware, but for size or weight, or to be fair, cost as well, some of them were kind of still thinking. But I mean, this is so small and light that, and the price point that it's at as well, a lot of people have been asking a lot of really positive questions about it and are showing a lot of interest too. So it's it's appealing to a broad church.
Could you just hold it in front of your face, because I think that will give people a better idea of its size. Right in front of you. Yeah. Okay.
Let me grab an X100V. So there's 100S. There's 100V.
Right. So those who don't know, the X100V is an APS-C format camera, and then we're looping to video format. So yeah.
There we go. So we got an APS-C sensor versus a larger than full frame sensor. In fact, let me show you briefly. It needs a clean anyway because I've been using it. There you go. See the difference just there. So it is a very small and lightweight body. On its own merits, it'd be small and lightweight, but considering the size of the sensor and all the internals, especially the IBIS unit and bits and bobs, the engineers have done a fantastic job making it as small and compact as they've been able to.
So it really is quite a versatile camera, because obviously when we had film, there were cameras that got used out and about, but traditionally we tend to think of medium format as being, particularly when we went to digital, big, heavy,
Yes.
cumbersome, often connected to a computer. So they were studio
Yes.
based, but this is really a versatile option that we can use for all sorts of photography.
Yeah, exactly. And it kind of, as I said, it appeals to a lot of different photographers. As you mentioned, kind of that size sensor is traditionally at home in a studio or for landscape or something like that. But it is small and portable enough to be used for street photography, documentary photography or something like that. I've used it at a couple of social things. Well, I say social things. I managed to shoot my other half while she was cooking and she didn't spot it. So it's very discreet, and I've always got a camera around, so she's pretty clued up on what I'm doing with it. So it's nice and small. For when we can get out into the world again for street work, it's going to be absolutely lovely as well, especially when you pair it with something like the 50mm, which is a very small lens. Now, I didn't mention the focal length multiplier. I mentioned the size of the sensor, but I didn't mention the focal length multiplier. If you're working out what the lenses would be as an equivalent on full frame, the proper number is 0.79 times, so 21% off. If, like me, can't do the 1% in your head, 20% is close enough. So 50 is going to be about a 40, give or take. The 80mm, the new one, is going to be about a 65. 250, that's an easy one, that's going to be about 200. So take 20% off, and that'll bring you back to full frame for focal lengths. For those that are Fujifilm shooters already and are perhaps thinking of running both systems, if you want the equivalent lens length, it's pretty much near as makes no odds. Double your focal length on your Fujifilm X series, and that will give you what the lens would be on the GFX series.
Okay. And what is the GFX series lens range like now? How many lenses are there?
Oh, I knew you'd ask me that. Many. Hang on, let me count them.
Many.
1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and a teleconverter. So we're going from the focal lengths are from 23mm, which will give you an 18 effective. So I'll run you through them. So we've got a 23, a 30, a 45, a 50, a 63, the 80, the 110, the 120, the 250 f4. Then for zooms, we've got a 3264, a 45 100, and a 100 200, which in full frame will be 18, 24, 35, 40, 50, 65, 85, 95, 200, and then the zooms are 25, 50, 35, 80, and 80 to 160. I think.
Okay, so that really is quite a long range. Really nice and wide.
Yeah,
up to telephoto. Is there a macro lens in there?
Yeah, the 120 f4 is a half macro. We do extension tubes with it as well to make it a 1:1 macro, and we do publish on our website as well the tables showing the macro reproduction ratios as well. If you're looking at doing something a little bit more extreme than that, there is also a large format adapter, so you can pop it on the back of a 5.4. And also as well, for those doing macro, we have also got our focus bracketing modes. Now, focus bracketing mode on the camera will essentially do the focus stacking without the merging. So whereas on previous models, it was a manual thing, so you had to set it up by depth of field and work out all your differences between each shot and work out the steps and the number of shots. Now we just go pick your start point, pick your finish point. The aperture is already set, push the button, and the camera will calculate how many shots it needs for the sequence and take the whole lot as well. So you've got a nice sequence where it's where you can merge it together afterwards.
Fantastic. And we've just got about a minute left, but I wondered, the pixel shift multi-shot mode, is that tripod only?
Absolutely. Yeah, nothing moving, either you or subject.
Right. Okay. So not necessarily suitable for landscapes on windy days, but for still scenes.
Exactly, because as with all pixel shift, when you've got a subject that's moving, it's recording a sequence of putting it together. So if you're doing a landscape with a seagull, for example, that seagull will be all over the place. So static subjects, both you and the subject.
Fantastic. Well, James, thanks very much for taking us through the full spec list. I mean, it's a really impressive, interesting camera. I can't wait to shoot with it.
I think you're going to love it. It's a great thing. And thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Well, thanks everybody for joining us, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the photography show.